Welcome to Girls Night In, everyone. My name is Katara Coleman. I am the co-owner of Southern Girl Desserts here in Los Angeles. My business partner, Shaniji, will be in and out as she is traveling. However, we are both so happy that you're here today. Today we are representing Florida A&M University, which is a historically Black college and university, and it's the university that Shaniji and I both attended for our undergrad degrees in Tallahassee, Florida. So the foundation actually raises money to send students from the Southern California to Tallahassee to attend FAMU. So we appreciate all of your support for that. We are so excited to share our chocolate chess pie with you all today. It is one of the oldest recipes that we know of, Southern recipes that we know of. If you all don't know, chess pie actually comes from what they tell us is that back in the day when there weren't refrigerators, people would put their pies, like the chess pie, into a chest, which kept out vermin and insects, and they were able to enjoy it a lot longer than if they just left it out. So that's where the name comes from. And so we will be teaching you this very simple recipe. I'm pretty sure if you did have to go and get some of the items, you had most of them in your cabinet already. I already had most of them in mine as well. I mean, it's very simple. You've seen the recipe: butter, sugar, flour, some vanilla, a little cocoa, and we're going to put this thing together. So hopefully some of you are following along and you'll be able to do this with us. If not, I'm sure you'll be able to catch this at another time. So we're going to go ahead and get started because I would love to hear your questions at the end, and you can also add them in the chat as we go. So our chocolate chess pie. And the great thing about the chocolate chess pie is we're doing chocolate, but if you want to make it strawberry, if you want to make it vanilla or any other flavor, you just substitute the cocoa and you can absolutely do that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get started with 2 cups of sugar. Now, it's not a good dessert without sugar, right? So what I'm going to do is I have my big bowl over here because all of the dry ingredients we're going to add and combine together before we add the others. So I'm going to add our 2 cups of sugar here. And, you know, just white granulated sugar. And then after you add the sugar, and this is an interesting recipe because most recipes you have a little bit more flour than you have sugar, or at least equal parts. We just have 2 tablespoons of flour, all-purpose flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that. I already pre-measured out for you guys. And then after we do that, we're gonna add a pinch of salt. And everybody's pinch of salt is relevant, right? Your pinch of salt is a little different from my pinch of salt. What I like to do is just take it, a little one dab, put it in there. That's my pinch of salt. You don't want to put too much. All right. This is a dessert, not something savory. All right. Okay. So then after we put our salt in, we're going to get the main ingredient for our chocolate chess pie is going to be our cocoa. And it's just your regular unsweetened cocoa. You can get, I have this brand. You can grab any brand that you may have. And we're going to just get our tablespoon and we're going to just put 4 in here. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? So I know sometimes when you're baking, you really have to like even it out and make sure when you're using like baking soda and salt and baking powder, yes, I absolutely suggest that you take your finger and level it out. But when we're using cocoa, sometimes we just go a little extra, a little bit more. So that's the 2nd tablespoon. We'll do a 3rd and we'll do a 4th. So baking for Shaniji and I it's one of those things that came natural. We're both from Florida. I'm from the Jacksonville area, from a small town called Green Cove Springs. And Shaniji is from Sarasota, Florida, which is farther south, closer to like the Tampa area. And we both grew up really, really big families. And the main happening on Christmas, Thanksgiving, family reunions, all those were desserts. And when you go to my family's house or her family's house for the holidays, you're going to see that desserts usually are more desserts than there are regular menu foods. Like there's more desserts than the turkey and the sides. You have pies and cakes and cookies and who knows? It's so much dessert. And we just developed these sweet tooths from early on. And we both actually learned to bake from our grandmothers, who are no longer with us, but they left this desire, this different talent with us. Oh, I see someone from the Jacksonville area. Hello. So they left this talent with us. And I don't know if any of you all had this experience, but you've had like these recipes that your grandmothers and mothers and aunts and all these folks, they made these delicious desserts while you're growing up, and you're like, oh my God, become an adult and you're like, I want that red velvet, I want that chess pie, and the recipe is incomplete. So when my grandmother passed away, I asked my aunts for the recipe cards, and when I received them, there was a pinch of this, a pinch of that, or it would just say sugar, or it would just say flour, but it wouldn't give measurements. And this is very similarly of what happened with this chess pie. So first of all, I've combined all of my sugar, my cocoa powder, my salt, and my flour have all been combined in a bowl together. And I'm just going to combine them with this spatula just to make sure that everything is, melding together. So while that's sitting for a while, let me go ahead and tell you this. So Shanichi's mother and father, when she was a young girl, moved to Alabama. And one of the nice ladies in the neighborhood actually came over with a chess pie to welcome them to the neighborhood. And so from there, her mom would make it off and on. And then when the bakery came around and we were, baking, and her mom was like, make me a chess pie. She was like, well, give me the recipe. And her mom was like, I haven't baked it in how long? I don't remember what goes into it. So that's when this version of the chess pie came about. Because like a lot of our recipes that we did inherit from family members, we had to put them together and piecemeal them, and until we got to that taste that reminded us of what it was. Because they didn't write a lot of these things down. They were actually in their mind, in their head, and they didn't get passed down. So one of the things that Shaniji and I are doing is making sure that we're calculating and we're putting these recipes together. And for our children and their children, they'll be able to be, the actual recipes will be able to be passed down. And hopefully this particular recipe you'll pass down to your children and grandchildren and friends, because it's really simple and very delicious. So now that we've combined our dry ingredients, we're going to get all of our wet ingredients inside of the mix. So first thing we're going to do is take our eggs. We have 4 eggs. I have them at room temperature, but if you don't, that's fine. It's not going to make a huge difference. So I'm going to go ahead and crack and add my 4 eggs. So we have 1. I always get shells. I didn't do it that time, but I'm being very careful. I want to impress you guys. I don't want to get shells in the eggs. That's my 2nd egg. And I'm using like medium, large size eggs. If you do large, that's fine. Medium to large is a nice size egg that you can use. So if you don't have a hand mixer, which I'm using today, you can use a stand mixer. If you just have one of these, use one of these. If you just have a fork, use that. But I'm going to use my hand mixer. So let's go ahead and get this. So what we're doing is we're combining our 4 eggs with the dry mix, which was the sugar, the salt, the cocoa, and the flour. So we're going to get this all incorporated here. I joke because when we're baking in the bakery, there we go. It doesn't take much. Go ahead and put that in there. When we're baking in a bakery, it's funny because Shaniji is very, 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 very like, I need all of the batter. And so she'll take one of these and scrape the whole thing to make sure that we get it all in. And so I'm gonna do that today. I'm gonna make sure that we're getting all of that cocoa, everything combined, that we're not missing, not leaving anything out. You all can see the texture of that. It's a little loose. It's almost like a brownie batter, if you've ever made brownies. This kind of reminds you of that, okay? All right. So we got all of that incorporated inside of that. Now it's time to add our milks. This is a 2 milk recipe. We have our condensed milk and we have our evaporated milk. So I'm going to pour in the condensed milk, and we'll go ahead and mix that in. And then, and this is not really a recipe that you can overmix because it comes out more like a mousse once it's baked. So I'm gonna put in my evaporated milk, which there, and it doesn't matter the brand. It's just a 1/2 cup of evaporated milk. And then I'm going to do the same measurement, which is a 1/2 cup of the condensed milk. But I'm going to need a little help from my spatula because, you know, condensed milk is very thick. And I call it condensed milk. Some people may call it sweet milk. You know, everyone has their different names for it. What names do you all call your condensed milk? It's funny because everyone has, you know, different pet names for it. It's very, very interesting. I'm gonna move all these to the side because we're gonna need this actual baking pan here for our next step. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix in our condensed milk here. There we go. You all can see that there. I'll bring it a little closer. I love this little handy dandy thing. It doesn't take up any space on your counter, and you can just use it and then put it back when you're done with it. It's like the best gift that I brought myself. Alrighty, so I have all of the ingredients except for one more. Oh gosh, how y'all gonna let me forget vanilla? Pure vanilla. I have 1 teaspoon of pure extract vanilla. If you don't use pure, that's fine. You can use imitation, but if you're going to use imitation, the suggestion is that you use, Jamie says she used sweetened condensed milk. Yep, you do the full name, right? Whole name. I'm using pure vanilla extract. If you don't have that and you just have the imitation at home, that's fine. But I just say double up. So if you were going to be using the imitation, do 2 teaspoons, because then you can get a little bit more of the flavor that the pure is a little bit more concentrated. So I'm just going to stir that into our batter, and voila, it's done. I told y'all that this was very, very simple. I mean, we had at max 6 ingredients, and most of them are they're your staples. They're already in the closet. And you know, this is a very old recipe, so they weren't using vanilla bean and they weren't using all of these fancy things back in the day. You notice that it was evaporated milk, it was condensed milk, because this is, I used to joke and say this recipe is the color purple recipe because it goes back so far. So, and like in the 1800s. And so they were using very simple ingredients that most people keep in their homes. And I just love how creative people were back in the day, and that this recipe still lives on to this day. Now, another part, before I get ready to pour in the actual batter into the crust, we've actually made our own crust. But you can do this, you can go to the grocery store. It's absolutely fine to get a frozen crust. And mine is a 10-inch crust. You can do 9, 10 inches, or even 11, but it'll fill it up just fine and bake just fine with what we have here. But what we did was we went ahead and par baked. So even if you make your own crust, or if you go to the grocery store and purchase a frozen crust, you still should par bake it for about 10 minutes in your oven. I had it about 300 degrees for about 10 minutes, par baked it. And the reason why we par bake our crust is because we want to make sure that it's not all doughy and the crust isn't done once the pie is done. So we try to give it a head start so that everything bakes at the same time. So before we actually pour our batter into our crust, I'm gonna move these items from here, because one of the things with a pie like this, if you bake it, just put it in the oven and just bake it, it's going to turn out fine. It's going to taste great. However, you also like things to presentation, right? When you're baking, you want it to look as good as it tastes. So what we do is we give our pie a water bath. And what a water bath is simply adding about 2 cups of water, and we're going to add it into our cookie sheet here. Any type of cookie sheet that you may have, as long as it has the sides coming up so that you can add the water and the water won't fall out. You want to put just enough water in to cover the entire cookie sheet, because you don't want it to bake and then evaporate. Because what this does is keep the top of your pie from cracking. So when you finish your pie, it'll be nice and smooth on the top. We do this for like lemon ice box pie as well, those types of custard type pies. Yes, Shaniji said in the chat, the water is very important. You can't miss this part, because then your pie will basically crack and kind of, it won't bake at the consistency that it should, and then it'll just look a little crazy. And we want to do this right. It's a simple recipe, but you have to follow the directions in order to get it to come out the way that it should. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put my pie crust that I've par baked inside of the water bath, a little water bath, and then I'm going to take my filling here and stir it up a little bit. Some, it can sit a little bit, and then that cocoa and all of that starts to sit at the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour that inside of the pie. Yes, we're gonna get every piece of this, every drop. We don't want to miss out. Oh, there we go. You got a few kids and they want to lick the bowl, and hey, give it to them. What's baking if you're not licking the bowl or the spoon, right? So we have that in there, and we already have our oven. We have our oven set at 300 degrees. So I believe it's Elaine. You're asking if your crust has to be cold. Well, what we do is some people will make their crust at the same time. We like to kind of make it in advance so that it actually can set, because once your crust can get a little soft, and it may start to, when it's baking, it may shrink a little bit, and then you don't get those nice pretty edges that you like. So it would be cool. It would be great if you could go ahead and maybe do it a few hours before and then put it over in the refrigerator or the freezer, just so it can set up. Because when you par bake it, it's going to shrink it a little bit. And then when you bake it with the actual filling, it's going to probably shrink a little bit more. So the more you have it set up and it's ready, it'll be best. But it won't make a difference if you don't do that. It's just, you may want to add a little bit more crust so that it can actually look like a pie when you're done. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stick my pie, be very careful because of the water, into the oven, and that's going to bake for 300 degrees for about an hour. And you can go ahead and test it like you do anything. Put a little toothpick in and make sure that it's not too much liquid coming out of it, and just put it in the middle, and then in an hour it'll be ready to go. What we like to do is, it needs to cool. This pie is best served cool. So once you bake it, you'll either leave it in the refrigerator overnight or for about 3-4 hours, and it has to set. Once it sets, y'all, let me show you something. This is what you get. You get perfect chocolate pie. No cracks. The crust is perfectly rounded. And the water bath, you owe that to the water bath, because if you don't, I promise you it's not going to look that pretty. So you have to do that. Now, I think the most important part of doing this is actually cutting the pie and eating it. I like to eat it with a little Cool Whip on top, but you can do whatever you like. So once you cut into it, I think I need to get a little sauce of this so you can see what this looks like. I'm gonna cut here. This is one of my favorite pies. And we usually, you know, if someone asks, we'll do this pie throughout the year, but this is really a holiday pie. This is the pie that we bring out for the holidays, and everyone enjoys this for this one time during the year. Is this chess pie. You all can kind of see how that looks there. Yes. And I'm actually going to put a little Cool Whip on top of mine because it just adds that extra little on there. Get my fork. A little Cool Whip. You see the crust there at the bottom? It's baked well. Y'all. What I love about this pie, it's super rich. You see this pie here could serve about 20 people, and maybe a little bit more because you don't need a huge slice. This slice is actually a little too big. Because the pie is so rich, you don't need a lot to like let it hit your sweet tooth and hit the sweet spot. Yeah, and Shaniji, she just put it in there in the chat. Don't cut it immediately. Like I said, let it cool so it can set up, because what you want it to get is this nice firm middle here so that you can cut it without it falling all over the place. And I know it's going to be so hard to wait. I promise it's worth it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really hope that you'll try this recipe. The pie, Lynn, the pie freezes really well. You can put this pie in the freezer as long as you wrap it up really well in some saran wrap. Wrap it up really, really good, and then put it in the freezer. It'll be, you can take it out, bake it in December, take it out in January, and it'll taste just as good. I promise you that. And like I said, it's a cold pie, so make sure once you bake it, you set it up in the refrigerator either overnight. Someone said, I see things coming through the chat, but it's really hard for me to read the entire sentence. So hopefully someone will be able to read these questions over to me. But thank y'all so much for joining us. You can find us on Instagram at Southern Girl Desserts, Facebook at Southern Girl Desserts, or just visit our website, southerngirldesserts.com. We'll be shipping I don't think we'll be shipping the chess pie for the holidays. If you're local here in Los Angeles, you can definitely order one and come by and have some during the holiday season. However, we will have pumpkin pie, our pecan pie, sweet potato pie. We have a sweet potato pecan combination pie, some pound cakes and cookies that you can find on goldbelly.com/Southern Girl Desserts, and you can order on there as well. Shaniji and I are so grateful for all of you all coming on and sharing this special family recipe with us today. And we hope that you'll give it a try. And when you do, tag us so that we can see how well it turned out.